Hi, and welcome back to Glassboxed, automating using JavaScript. Today we are going to write our first tests using a testing framework as opposed to using a method as we did in our last video. So before we have a look at the testing framework that we're going to use, i.e. JUnit, we're just going to have a quick glimpse over the test that we wrote and what it does, so that we can refer to it a little bit easier later on. So the first thing we did was we created an instance of WebDriver using a Firefox browser. We then used that Firefox browser to navigate to this particular website. What we then did was, when we navigated to that page, we searched for an element on the page which had an attribute of type ID with a value of contact underscore link. Actually, correction, it was about underscore link, and then we clicked on the about link. We then got the title of that current page, and then we did a quick if statement to check if we were on the page we were expecting to be on. Otherwise, we printed a statement saying, sorry, the page we were instead was whatever the page we were on, which also outputted the title of the page, and then we close the browser. So what we're going to do now is we're going to migrate this entire test into a testing framework dressing. So before we actually write the test, let's have a quick kind of pros and cons, or method versus testing method, to just get a feel of why we would want to write tests using a testing framework as opposed to testing a method. To quickly go over what methods are for an application, my view is that methods are kind of like the bare bones of an application, and as such the focus of such methods should be on the application level, i.e. a method inside an application should do kind of application level tasks. So to me that means if application methods then start performing test tasks, then we kind of lose the importance of application methods. So that leaves us with the question: if the application methods aren't supposed to do the testing, then what is? And the answer to us comes in the form of testing frameworks. And in this particular video we're going to look at JUnit's framework. So talking about testing frameworks from an abstract perspective, a testing framework is basically a specialized framework that is used to run tests and carry out other additional tasks. In essence, it allows us to do various degree of things. We can use a framework that runs outside of our application, and we can run, say, a number of tests against an application that has just been deployed. So we can run the same test on various different applications if we want, provided we can do it. And probably one of the biggest thing that testing frameworks provides us is with assertion methods. So what are assertion methods? They're basically a way for us to identify if a test has passed or if it has failed, and then the result of the test is then displayed to us in a much more elegant manner. So at the moment, when you run our test, we're just kind of doing system outs here, saying whether this test has passed, but the context rather of this result means more to us than to anyone else. So what that means is, if we were to see, say, this line here, to us that means that the test has passed, but that doesn't really bring us a lot of value. It doesn't really say to, say, someone who's just run the test whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. So let's just say, instead of this line here, we got this printed out instead. If someone were to look at the results for the first time, it doesn't really tell them if a test has passed or failed. It just said instead found a page with title. So for all they know, the test worked. It didn't kind of explode or anything. It didn't kind of die with an exception, or the code itself failed. The test ran from end to end. So as far as they may be concerned, they might think it's passed. In essence, it might give us a kind of a false positive, or a so what that means is someone might be under the assumption that a test has passed when indeed it hasn't. So the bottom line is, testing frameworks, since their focus resides in test, gives us much more freedom to test our application. So this means we can use testing frameworks to run our automated scripts, and at the same time take advantage of all of these perks. So enough talk. Let's actually write one of these basic. Let's write a basic outline of what a JUnit test looks like. To do this, we just make a new class. So new class. I'm just putting it in this directory. It doesn't really matter. And the naming of your test is actually quite important as well, because you'll have various tests inside your JUnit test. So you should try and name the class test to be relevant. So what we're going to do is we're going to name it something along the lines of testing. Actually, let's not call it testing. Let's give it web app page title test. Finish that. Right. Now we're going to actually start writing the JUnit framework. So I'm just going to go ahead and just write a few things, and I'll explain to you what this means. So JUnit provides us with well, not JUnit, but Java provides us with something called annotations, which basically allows us to mark a test, or rather, sorry, mark a method so that it means a little bit more. So JUnit provides this annotation called the before annotation, and what that means is this annotation, which is applied to the following method. So let's just say public void method name. This means is what this means now is that this annotation is tied to this particular method. So whatever kind of rules are governed for this annotation will now apply to this method. So JUnit provides us with a couple of annotations. The three we're going to look at for this particular video are the before, here. We're going to look at the after, public void method name, and we're going to look at the test. Now, what do these annotations actually mean? Now, let's go into a little bit of detail. What the before method does is, the rules that are governed for this particular annotation is that whenever we run a test, this annotation and the method that's tied to this, i.e. all of this, will always run before running a method with a test annotation. So this, for instance. So that's what the before does. So every time we run a test method, this method would run first, and then this test method would run after. Next, the after annotation. What this annotation does is, any method that's marked with the after annotation will run quite commonsensely after a test has run. So if we were so what that means is, whenever we run this particular test, what will happen is this method will run first, followed by this method, followed by this method, because of the annotation. And we can really quickly test this. So let's just do system dot out dot println let's just say 1, and call this 1. Copy these in really quickly. Give this a value of 3 because this method is supposed to run last since it's the after. Give this a value of 2 since this is supposed to run second. And we've got these red lines because the libraries for this haven't been resolved, so we're just going to resolve them really quickly. Right. So now if we run this, we'll just right click somewhere in the class, we'll go run as JUnit. If you look here, what's happened is, since the statements are printed in order that the whole kind of test that has run, it's printed at 1 first because this run first, then it printed at 2 because this runs second, i.e. the test, and then 3, i.e. the after class. And we can use this to our advantage. This can actually help us set up tests to do various things, and that's what we're going to do now. So the before method, because it runs first, I like to call it the test setup. Since the after method runs after every test, I like to call it the test shutdown. And the actual test itself, what I like to give it, what I like to call it, is very specific to what the actual test is. So the test method, I like to name them as what the test should be. So if we were to refer back to our test we wrote, which was to check that the about title was correct, I'd name it appropriate to that. So should have page title of about soon. Right, now what we're going to do is we're just going to copy in our test. So we're going to copy the whole lot here, and there's some indenting problems. Do that. And what we're going to do now is we're going to grab each bits of this and put them in the relevant place. So create a driver instance and make it of type Firefox browser. So that's surely a before stage because it's the first thing that happens. So we're going to put it right in here. Go to a web page. Now I'd probably put that as part of the test, i.e. that's the first step of the actual test, to go to this particular page. Click on a link, i.e. the about link. Yes, that's part of the test as well. That would go here. And then here, this is where our logic sits, which is so this is where we test the actual title of the page. So this would go in here, and then driver.close, well, this is the last thing that happens in the test, which is where we close the browser. This would go in our after method. Right, so let's do some little bit cleaning up. Right. Right, so you've noticed that got some problems, some red lines. That's because what we're trying to do is basically access this driver instance here, but because this is inside a method, as is this and this, it's not able to access it because the scope is restricted. So what we need to do is basically provide it more. So we need to just widen the scope of this, and we can quite easily do this just by putting it outside of the method here. So now all our issues should have been resolved. I'll just remove these comments because we don't really need them anymore. I mean, we know that they run in order. Now let's look at what our test does. So according to the comments we got, this runs first. So that now means that before every test method, we will actually create a new instance of the driver of type Firefox, and then we know that the test runs. So when our code hits this this method, what will happen is we'll go to that particular URL, we'll click on the about link, we'll get the title, and then we'll do some kind of checking of whether we're on the right page or not, and then we're gonna call the last method, the outer method, to close the driver. So let's run this. Notice that our test has actually appeared here as well. The name of the test has appeared here. This is going to be important in a bit. For the moment term, I think it's just important we take note of this. Right, so is our test running? Did I run it? I'll just run it here, shall I? Okay, I'll just run it again here. Right, our test should fire up. Right, so it should appear soon. I just did kick it off. Right, okay. Web browsers open up, went to the about page, test finished, and we got a statement here. Cool. Now, I talked about assertions. So going back, assertions are basically something that allows us to give us a little bit more information whether a test has passed or not. So again, if we looked at this, this says whether something's passed or not. But testing frameworks actually provide us with information such as this. So the framework actually told us that this test ran, and it took close to 10 seconds, and we got a tick here saying it passed, which is fantastic. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use assertions, which tell us whether something has passed or not. An assertion is quite literally just that. We're asserting to see the result of something. So if we were to just kind of get rid of this for the moment, because we're not going to do that anymore. In fact, we're not going to even do this anymore. What we're going to do is go assert so assert that let's just go assert true, and what we're going to do is say driver dot get title dot equals about Zoo. So let me explain what this means. So assert, this method here, assert dot assert true, is part of JUnit's libraries, which allows us to check for something. So this is specifically checking for something, very similar to our if statement but much more powerful. And what we're doing here is we're saying driver dot get title, which gives us a title, and we know that get title returns us a string. Then we can use a dot on it to say equals, and then give it a value of about Zoo. So what we're saying here is get the title of the page we're currently on, and assert that it is equal to about Zoo. And if it is, then this assert would have passed. If it isn't, then the assert would have failed, i.e. the test would have failed. So let's run this really quickly now. So I've just run the test. It should boot up really quickly. There we go. So it's run the test, gone to the about, done something. Right. So notice we've actually removed all these comments because we don't want to do it via this way. This doesn't give us any meaningful information. At best, it might give us some confusing information, or it might give us information that means something to one person and something else to someone else. And we go here and we see a lovely tick saying that the test took 9 seconds to run, and that was it. What we're going to do now is we're going to actually change it to fail on purpose. So going back, I think the link was contact linked, right? Let's run this and see what happens. So we know that when we go to this link, i.e. we go to the contact page instead, the title for that page isn't about zoo, it was contact, I think. So let's run this. So now we're expecting this test to fail. So it's running, it's gone to the contact page, and boom, test failed. So now if you look, we've got a red bar which is different to our green bar. If we have a look a little bit more, what we can see is the test took 9 seconds, but as opposed to a tick, we've now got an X. We've also got a failure of 1, and we can see that that the assertion expected something to be true, but it was in fact false. So if you think about this as opposed to this approach here, this means more to us, because without having to know too much about the details, just ignoring everything here, ignoring everything there, just by looking at this, we know that the test failed. We know that we didn't get an expected result. This is much more powerful than this. Going back to our test, we're going to change it back. We can write multiple tests in the same test class. So we can actually do this. We can control copy, and we can paste it in, and let's change this to say well, let's say contact. Right. Let's say contact here, and I think the name of the title was contact. Right. So if I now run this test, which now has two different tests, but only one before method and only one after method, what do you think is going to happen? Well, what's going to happen is it's going to run these two tests, but it's going to run the before method twice, once before running each test, and then the after method also twice, once before running each test. So what's going to happen is it's going to say, I'm going to open up a Firefox browser, and then I'm going to look at this test, this being the first test. I'm going to go to this link, I'm going to click on this link and check it's got that title, and then it's going to run the after, and it's going to close that browser. Now, because there's two tests, it needs to do this again, so it's going to open up again another browser, do the test, come back and close the browser. Now, before we actually go any forward, we can actually do a little bit of cleaning here. Notice that this step actually occurs twice. This happens in this test, and we do it in this test, which means we can actually move this out of this test entirely. So we can put it here as part of the test setup. Why? Because going to this step isn't actually crucial to the step, to the test. The crucial part of this test is to make sure we are able to go to a particular page and to check the title of that page. The focus of this step is effectively the same thing, but on a different page. This is more part of the setup, so we can actually move it in the test setup step. Right? So let's run this now and see what happens. So run it. Now look, there are actually two different tests here, one saying about zoo and the other about contact. So look, it's opened up the web browser, it's gone to the about page, it's closed the web browser, and now if you notice, it's running another one. I haven't run it, it's still running. It's run it, it's gone to the contact page, checked, and there you go. So if we expand this out now, we can see that the first test took about 9 seconds and the second test took about 9 seconds. We know there were two tests, and there were 0 errors and there were 0 failures. Now, just to make sure it's kind of working, we're just going to put in this in there, but let's just keep this as is. So now if we run the test, we're expecting this to fail. What we're basically saying is we expect the title to contain about, or rather to be equal about random zoo, but we know that's not the case. We know that the title will be about zoo, so this test will surely fail. And then it's going to come down to this test where we haven't changed anything. So if we rerun this, what would you expect is this test to give us an X or a failure, the number of runs to still be 2, but the number of failures to go up to 1, and then when you click on the failures, would expect to see some kind of message. The context should remain as is because we know that works. So let's run this. So look, it's starting from scratch again. It's running using JUnit runner. Right, so it's gone to the about page. Boom, failed. And notice that because it's failed the first test, it's still going to continue to run all your other tests, which is one of the kind of fundamental strengths of any testing framework. If your application was to run and the first few lines it failed, your whole application could effectively crash. It's one of the reasons why something crashes. There are obviously other reasons why an application crashes, memory leaks for instance, but other causes can be something inside the application isn't working, like a line of code isn't working and it's finished. We don't really face that kind of problem with testing frameworks. So what's happened here is, this test has failed and JUnit's effectively gone, it's failed, no worries, we've still got more tests to run, let's just run the others and see what happens at the end. So we still run 2 tests and one's failed. We click on the happy test, nothing to report because there isn't anything to report, it's passed. We coded the test, we know what happens, there's nothing to report. It's redundant information in essence. If we click on the failure, however, we see that the expected result was supposed to be true, but instead we got false and it failed. So this probably doesn't mean a lot because it doesn't actually say what the failure really is, but we know that the test has actually failed. And that's really it, to be honest. What we've done is we've taken an old we've taken our first test, which is run as part of the main method, and we've migrated that using a testing framework instead, which gives us more versatility over how to set up a test, do some clean coding after a test has finished, and actually write multiple different tests, and at the same time reduce repetition, whilst also giving us some more meaningful results as opposed to system out text. So I hope you've kind of enjoyed this video. Please leave a comment below. Thanks a lot for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please subscribe. Any issues or questions, leave a comment below. Thanks a lot. Ciao.